Well, good afternoon if you are in New York or the eastern part of North, Central, and South America. Good morning if you are in points further west. Good evening to those of us or those of you who are following us in the UK as you maintain a vigil for your queen. Special love and greetings to our loved ones in Ukraine. Stay strong. Good evening also to people in Łódź, Poland, and all over Poland. And good middle of the night to everyone in the south part of South Asia that we call the Indian subcontinent, and especially to listeners in Bangalore. You wonder why I'm saying that. But first, let me say who I am. I'm Fred Plotkin. It's Friday, so this is Fred Plotkin on Fridays on Adagio, the place where classical music happens. Adagio is a video and audio streaming platform dedicated to supporting artists and to making classical music and opera available to fans all around the world. My guest today is a baritone, Nikhil Goyal, and he joins us from Łódź in Poland, but he is originally from Bangalore, India. I want to get into all kinds of topics with him. But first, Nikhil, welcome.
Hi, Fred. It's really nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
And hear you. Thank you for inviting me into this conversation. I've been looking forward to it since you asked me to, and it's been quite a summer, so it's the perfect time for me to join you on this conversation
because I'm glad to hear about it. I want listeners to know that you and I have never been in the same room together. It's been a long time since we've been on the same continent together, but we've never personally met, but we correspond. We began corresponding, I think, about 6 years ago, the way people can do now. It used to be that there was something called a pen pal, where I would write a letter and put it in the post box, and off it would go to India or Poland or Italy, wherever. But now with technology, I could send you an email and you could answer me. And we developed the kind of friendship that one can only have when we've never actually met. I've never heard your speaking voice before today. I've heard your singing voice because there are wonderful examples of your work on YouTube. But yes. So this is new for me too, and I'm very glad to see you and hear you. So I guess I'm going to start by saying that regular listeners know of my great affection for Italy. I lived a lot of my life in Italy, did a lot of my opera training in Italy. And my approach to this particular life I have is often to see how Italy has changed and touched and affected the world. And a big part of that is opera. But I also say to people, and I mean this in all sincerity, if there is reincarnation, and if I do get another life, that next life will be devoted to India. India is the subject that I'm most interested in, that I know almost nothing about. But to me, it has always exerted an incredible fascination for its culture, for its diversity, for the character of its people, for the beauty of its people, for its music, which is amazing, for its cinema, which is very confusing to me, but I love it. Just the energy of the people of India, and by extension, what is called the former Raj, the Indian subcontinent, South Asia. There's all this terminology, which would include Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and maybe even by extension, places like Nepal and Bhutan. But so when I discovered you years ago and discovered that you are an Indian opera singer, and I don't know much about opera in India because I don't think there is that much. I know there are a couple of buildings that call themselves opera houses. And I know that the very famous conductor Zubin Mehta is from India. His father was a violinist. His brother is an arts administrator. And they've made great contributions, but Zubin Mehta did most of his studies in Vienna, has worked mostly, I don't like to use terms like East and West, so I'll speak of continents. He's worked mostly in Europe, in Israel, and in North America. But how did you in Bangalore? Well, first tell me about Bangalore. What kind of place is it?
Well, where can I start? Bangalore is one of the largest cities in India with close to, well, we could say more than 8 million people. And it was once called, I think it's still called the Garden City of India, owing to its green cover, all of the trees and everything. I remember the weather being very pleasant, the summers being quite mild, and the winters as well. So it was, I had a perfect, perfect weather right through my childhood. So I remember that. I moved out of Bangalore 12 years ago to pursue my studies in music as a vocalist. Since then, a lot has changed in Bangalore, my hometown. But what I could say is that the city has a lot to offer for anyone who wants to settle down there and live there. Uh, from music to food to movies, places to hang out, healthcare, education. So it's really a fantastic city to be in and to live in. I still have family there. Yeah.
Is there a particular business, industry, art form that is typical of Bangalore?
Well, Bangalore, it happens to be also the capital of the state called Karnataka. So uh, it is a center for the film industry, for the local film industry, the regional film industry, but it's also very much in demand as a center for the IT industry, for the information technology industry. It is called the Silicon Valley of India.
That's what I understood. I have a friend. I used to be his mentor, but now he's fully grown up and on his own. And he and his wife were journalists, but they changed careers and went into the diplomatic corps. And they
Uh,
were based in Bangalore and they
okay.
loved it. They adored it and wrote to me very happily about it all the time. So I have that connection to it. They're being journalists, they're very good writers. So their descriptions to me of Bangalore were very rich. And in fact, they spoke of the greenness of the place. So,
Yeah.
and the food and the music. I'll just say further about the music of India, which is very complex, very detailed. The BBC just did a series about the music of India.
Okay.
And um, I love it. And it's not opera in any way that I know of, but it reflects the diversity of the nation, the religious diversity of the nation, the geographic diversity of the nation. It's a country with, I think, 1.3 billion people.
Yeah.
And so there's no one India, and there's no one type of Indian music or food or languages. And that to me is part of the fascination that we talk about the United States being diverse. India strikes me as being even more diverse within the confines of its ethnic traditions, because here in the United States, we have people from India, from Pakistan, many from Bangladesh and New York City, from Sri Lanka, but we have from every nation of the world. Um, I don't think it's quite that to the same degree that there are many people moving to India. There might be, but as I said, I would need another lifetime. Do you believe in reincarnation?
Well, I think about it.
Yeah,
Um, I'm not sure if it's for me to believe in, but I do think about it, and I think that if it does exist, it does exist to give me a chance, to give us a chance to go back and well, not go back, but go forward and hopefully try to pick a different path, a path better suited for us and for everyone else. So I like to think of it that way. Um, I guess at some level I do believe in it. At some level I do believe that um, that is something that we generally uh, strive for because because life is beautiful and the world is a beautiful place and it would be fantastic to come back. Of course, I don't know of what happens after. If that's a better place, I don't know about that, but I believe that the world is a beautiful place, and we have beautiful lives to live. So,
Well, I
yeah.
ask because I have very dear friends from Mumbai, a family, and the
Uh,
mother in the family strongly believes in reincarnation, and it gives her a serenity and a peace about her that's very beautiful. It's very attractive. She's a beautiful woman, but that peace and tranquility that she has is part of what makes her attractive. And it's because if she does not accomplish something in this life, she's
right.
confident she'll have another life to do it in. I'm not
Yeah.
persuaded. I wish I could be. Because as I said to you, if given another life, it would be devoted to your country and your part of the world because it really fascinates me. So within that context, and by the way, I'll have a guest on in October who is from your
All right.
part of the world further north. I really want my program to reach everywhere. Um, where did opera ever figure, let's call it Western opera, European opera,
Right.
also North American, where did that figure in your upbringing in Bangalore, or how did you encounter opera?
I rather came across it by accident. Well, because I was originally I was thinking about studying to play the guitar. And back then, well, I'd always been singing ever since I was a little boy, but I was mainly singing in church choirs. I was singing in choirs with friends, that sort of thing. But when I decided that I want to study music and I picked the guitar as my principal instrument, I thought about studying in Europe, and a friend of mine then told me that if I want to do that, I'd have to do an entrance exam. And so it's a good idea to brush up on my theory and my music. So I attended lessons with the teacher then, and the teacher told me that he's going to teach me well, to help me with my vocal technique, he's going to teach me some songs, some Italian songs, which I wasn't really fond of the idea in the beginning because to me that was classical music and that was too stiff and too, you know, I wasn't very fond of the idea, but I did it anyway. And I have to say that the more I did it, the more I looked into this music, the more I liked it. And I think you know, the tipping point for me was when I needed to learn how to pronounce the Italian words. And so I looked around and I finally stumbled upon, and this was for the first time, this was back in 2007, 2008. I stumbled upon a recording of Luciano Pavarotti, and I I hadn't heard him before, and I listened to him sing Caro mio ben, uh, and that was it for me. So that's what then drew
Was
me.
it the sound of his voice, the beauty of the song, the language, the Italian language?
I have to say it was just about everything. I mean, the whole experience of listening to something like that. I couldn't put my finger on it back then, and I can't put my finger on it right now. Although I do admit that now, I do find myself looking to his recordings for guidance, for vocal guidance, to listen to, um, well, to try to remind myself of the direction that I have to head in. But back then it was just the whole experience of listening to it. It was like a phenomena for me.
You sent me an email a few years ago in which you told me that your first contact with let's call it European opera, was you became aware of a very fat man with a beautiful voice. And that would be Luciano. But
Yes, yes, that would.
it's
But actually,
interesting. Yes.
yeah, go on.
I'm saying it's interesting that sometimes, he was a world famous figure. They knew him in the Amazon. The natives in northern Brazil who lived in the jungle in the Amazon knew Luciano Pavarotti. And when he came to sing in Manaus in the opera house there in the jungle, they knew him. And he was that much of a worldwide figure, not just because of the glorious voice, but also his visual image, his personality, that he extended well beyond the confines of the opera house and the opera world to becoming a worldwide figure. So, I can understand in India that many people would not know him, but many probably certainly do.
We have come across opera, but mainly for me and my brothers and sisters and his sister and my friends, it was mainly through Looney Tunes or when Bugs Bunny was, on stage and, or Tom and Jerry, that kind of stuff. So we always saw something, of the opera in these cartoons. Usually it was Wagner, or yeah, it's possible that
And
Pavarotti.
Rossini, the William Tell Overture.
Yes,
Also,
of course. Yeah. So there was that, but I didn't really connect it to that being opera. It was just something funny because I was a little boy. I was 8 or 10, and we just started. I mean, back when I was 8 or 10, we didn't even have cable television. We just had a couple of channels on TV. Those were the national channels, and sometimes, well, once a week, probably, if my memory serves me right, I think that was on Sunday mornings. We could watch some of these cartoons, and sometimes we could watch this. So we didn't really have the exposure. But I do remember that when I really had to get into it and I really had to learn the song, I needed desperately to find some kind of source where I could learn to imitate the words. So that was my first, I would say, experience, and I have to say that was one of the things that got me going. And of course, right through after that, all of my teachers and the people I've worked with and the people I've listened to on the internet or live have just inspired me further.
So two questions. One is, I've never thought about television in India, but with a nation with so many languages, if there were two channels, national channels at the time, would one be in Hindi and maybe the other in English, or what languages would the channels be in?
I remember that generally we switched on television in the evenings when my dad came home from work, and he would usually watch the news. And the news was, I think there was like a half hour of the news in Hindi, and also then a half hour of the news in English. And we had a regional television channel, which we didn't watch because it was in the regional language, Kannada. And we didn't quite understand that language back then. So we didn't watch that. But I do remember the two languages, and most of the programs were in Hindi. But then sometimes there would be some educational programs, something similar to what we have on the Discovery Channel now, and those sometimes could sometimes be in English.
So I think you'll understand where I'm going with my next question. In Hindi, what are the vowels and how are the vowels pronounced?
The vowels are pretty much the same as the open sounds, and they are a, and we have a shorter a and a longer a, And so I'll just say them for you. I'll spell them for you. So it's R, and then there's an E. So it's kind of like a staccato E, and then E, U, E, A, O, and these are the
What was the
different
last
vowels.
one?
Um, uh.
Uh-huh.
It's,
Is
it's
there
more.
no U sound, no oo, you? Like if I say the word you, is there that sound? How are you?
Ooh, yeah.
Okay.
There's that sound. So that's also a vowel, yes, in Hindi.
So when you sing opera or art songs in European languages, do you summon your vowel making from Hindi, from your excellent English? Where do your vowels come from? Because when I work with singers, when I listen to singers, I'm always very mindful of the vowels because I can usually, some languages like Finnish and
Yeah,
Italian really favor vowels.
right.
Other languages like Russian change the vowels, and a Russian singer or Ukrainian singer can have a beautiful voice, but the I and the U sounds are just a little different. The O becomes an
Mhm.
U. So I worked with a tenor once who was singing the opera Tosca, was singing Mario Cavaradossi, and he kept calling her Fluria Tusca, which we could not get the different O, Floria Tosca. Um, where your vowels come from in your native languages, how do they favor your singing in German and in Italian and French?
All right. This is very interesting. It's a very interesting question for me because I did talk about this with my voice teacher, and he did tell me, this is a long time ago, that he has a feeling that the Hindi R is placed a little um, is rather placed to the rear of the resonance, and and what he needs is the Italian R, which is forward placed.
Yes.
So this is definitely one remark I've heard from a voice teacher. So, and when it comes to when sometimes singers sing ooh, as you said, Fluria Tosca, I sometimes think that happens because of the way singers might have to allow for more room. We're talking about technique now, so more room for the sound to stay in a sort of focused position. And depending on the singer, sometimes singing an open O sound, an O sound could uh, result in the voice being too dispersed and not so much focused. And this is something that I think sometimes happens. A lot of singers tend to work with this quite a bit. Um, I think that also in Polish, for example, the O is different from the Italian O. The Polish O tends to be more like O,
Mhm.
Johann, um, or Plotkin, O.
Yes,
And so the Italian would probably be more like Plotkin, O, forward. And
exactly.
Polish O tends to be a little more dispersed and larger. That's how I feel it personally. Yeah.
So I want to get a little later to the fascinating story of how you wound up in Poland. But what I'm about to ask you to do is not a test, but just it will really show this question of vowels in a different way. From Le Nozze di Figaro by Mozart, Figaro has an aria, Se vuol ballare signor Contino,
Yeah.
Se vuol ballare il chitarrino le suonerò. I know you've worked on that role.
Yeah.
If you can sing it if you want, or just speak it if you want, but I want to hear how the vowels work from a man whose vowels were born as you described them. And I know you've done a lot of training, and I know you've listened to Thomas Allen, who to me, he's British, is an exemplary Figaro. So I'm very happy with him. He's a baritone as well, although Figaro is often sung by a bass. And if you would, just either speak or sing if you want the words. I didn't ask you to come on to sing, but you can speak them. But it's really a question of the work that a singer has to do to create a role.
So this is, so I'll speak it.
Yes.
And then if you would like it, I would sing it.
Yes.
Se vuol ballare, signor Contino, il chitarrino le suonerò.
Okay.
And if I sang it, I don't know if it'll be different, but let's see. Se vuol ballare, signor Contino, se vuol ballare, signor Contino, il chitarrino le suonerò, il chitarrino le suonerò, sì, le suonerò, sì, le suonerò.
Thank you. So now that we've discussed this in terms of your hearing of the vowels, where do you see the vowels coming from?
I don't think about that actually.
Okay, I mean, this is not a test, but it's just that I'm not familiar enough with Hindi to know about it. I know certain European languages, but if I were to meet you and work with you,
right,
I would always start first with the vowels because that's fundamental. Consonants are important too, of course, but especially in a legato language like Italian or certain kinds of music, the vowels are crucial.
Right. I think that the vowels are rather a mix for me because the time that I've spent in Poland, I hardly speak to anyone in Hindi. I mainly work with the Polish language. I tend to speak to my family in Hindi, but that happens only on the phone and not regularly, although often. I do speak to people in English here, but over the years, I think I've developed a way of speaking to Polish people that is better understood by the Polish people. So I'm not too sure how that works, but I think depending on which production I'm a part of and who I'm working with, we generally work on the pronunciation with a coach, or very often the pianist who I'm working with is also has very good ears and listening and hearing, and the pianist very often corrects a lot of the singing and the vowel and the vowel placement. Yeah.
So I don't speak Polish. When I see it on the printed page, there are many more consonants than there are in Italian. They're often the same consonants, W's and Z's and things, and L's, which are not pronounced that way. The former Pope Karol Wojtyła didn't read that way. The town Łódź where you live is spelled Lodz, I think.
Yep.
So what was the challenge, number one, of learning Polish, and number two, speaking and reading Polish, when it is so, well, number one, the Hindi alphabet is entirely different from the European alphabets of most countries. Right. Talk about the challenge of moving to a country, number one, that is so completely different from India, but number two, where the language is not commonly spoken, even in opera. Polish opera singers need to learn German, French, Italian, English.
Right. I think Well, there's a lot to say here actually, because if I want to break this down, I think moving to Poland, it was the first time I saw snow, and the first time I experienced the cold weather. It was -20. I think it was -18 when I landed, possibly, or -8. I'm not sure. I remember checking it, and that was the coldest I'd ever experienced in my life. So I was shocked to see a city completely blanketed white with snow. So those are the kinds of let's say I don't know, travel shock that I had to put up with. As far as the language is concerned, I did do a short course in the beginning. A friend of mine told me that I don't really need to learn Polish, because most of the teachers at the academy will speak in English with me. But after the first few months, I realized that as much as their English is very good, my singing teacher, for example, I think it would only help me to learn the language and to be able to understand them better. So I just paid more attention to talking to how my friends were talking to me. I tried to participate in as many activities as I could at the academy, to be a part of as many projects as possible, because I knew it would help me as much as it would help me to participate in the whole scheme of things. It would also help me with my language. So I think it took me about, I think by the end of my third year, I was able to speak broken Polish, and um, 5 years of being here, I managed to, with the help of my then girlfriend, of course, with a lot of help with my then girlfriend, I managed to write my master's thesis in Polish as well,
Yeah.
and defend it in Polish. So yeah, and now of course I work at the theater, and we use Polish as the medium of instruction and communication.
Something you described struck a chord with me. I've never been to India, as you know, but if Bangalore has 8 million people, uh, Indian cities, to my knowledge, are very loud and animated, and the air is fragrant with all kinds of things. And there's a huge sensorial event that happens, to me, in a wonderful way, when you hear sound and smell things and taste things and colors, and the colors of the clothing and everything. And that's very thrilling to me. But then to get to Poland, where there's white snow on the ground and everything is silent, because snow, in a beautiful way, brings silence. Were
Right.
you aware of the absence of sound and animation when you were in your first snowfall there? How did you experience the snow beyond the cold of the visual?
Well, yeah, that was interesting, and I've actually grown to like it very much. In the beginning, I do remember that it was almost like being in a very cold desert with no one around, and it's generally very quiet in here in Poland. I suppose it is the same in many other cities around Europe generally. But back then, it did strike me as um, surreal. I In the beginning, I did miss the excitement, the activity, and so on. But I've grown to like it very much. And now I even enjoy it. I was just in India a month ago, and actually in July, I was in India in July, and it was very hectic all through the streets. They were repairing the streets, the roads. They were building a new metro connection. There's a lot of traffic, a lot of people all over the place. we also have a lot of mosques in the city, and so the call for prayers are heard every day.
Five times a
So
day.
five
Yeah.
times a day, and so and especially, and that's actually a very beautiful moment because you tend to hear, at least for me, that I hear the call for prayer from one mosque, and then a fraction of a second later it starts from another mosque, and then from another. That's kind of a reminder of where you are, and that is something that I don't have here. So when I'm in India, it's a stark reminder of where I am,
Mhm.
and so those are like, that's a huge difference for me, for being Poland versus being in India. Yeah.
So, why, when you sought to study opera and become an opera singer, did you pick Poland?
Um, I didn't really think much about it. I didn't really pick Poland. I didn't research much about it. What happened was I was part of this festival of Polish culture, celebrating Polish culture in my city in Bangalore back in 2009. And I was helping a friend with putting up the whole show. And he had invited a few singers from Poland to come in and present Polish music, as well as generally opera music, to sing arias and duets. Um, and since I was taking lessons back then, I was very keen on being the one who sort of takes care of their needs and provides them with the hospitality that they might need. So I was tasked with meeting them and greeting them, and then we got to know each other, and then I happened to discuss with them that I'm interested in music and I'm taking lessons. And then they asked me to sing for them, which I did happily. And then they invited me on to sing with them on that concert. That was a very difficult concert for me to sing. Um, and I was very nervous, but I remember the encouragement that I got from them. And then they invited me to come back to Poland and train my voice. They thought that I should train my voice. I have a good voice. And I thought, why not? I mean, I'm thinking about studying music anyway. So I just signed up for a language course to begin with. And then while I was doing the language course here, I also applied for the entrance exams to the Academy of Music in Łódź. And there you go. That's how it happened.
Mm. And there are so many questions I could ask. How is the approach at the Academy in Łódź? I'm not going to say different, let's say, from what it might be in Italy, Germany, France, Austria, Switzerland, Britain, North America, because I don't know the degree to which you've been exposed to those. But what are the fundamentals that you have been given? Where did they start? And I don't mean because you're from India, I mean because you're a baritone. Where did they start in your training to make you an opera singer?
Um, I'm not entirely sure if I understand your question, but I'm gonna talk about my time at the academy and what kind of training we received at the academy back then. And then you can ask me again if I haven't answered your question. So I do remember very fondly attending ballet lessons, lessons with stage movement, and acting lessons, which involved reciting prose, reciting poetry, um, acting out scenes with my friends, with my classmates. And of course, we had every week we had a lesson of technique with my teacher, my vocal teacher, voice teacher. I had one lesson with a pianist to work on my repertoire. And then I had one lesson with the teacher and the pianist together, where usually all of us, three or four of us who were singing with the same teacher would be present during each other's lessons, and we would observe, and then we would try to work, this, hopefully trying to incorporate the advice or the suggestions of the teacher to the other students as well. So that's how it worked. We also had ear training we also had music theory, music history, and we had electives. All the vocal students had to take Italian language lessons to understand at least the basics of the language and how it works. And then we had a lot of electives. So I chose a year of Russian. I did already speak German, and I do speak German up to B1 level, I think. So that's like, I can get by if I'm in Germany. I did a short course in art history. So these were the electives. So it was a very holistic sort of approach back then for me. And I think it was very informative. I really enjoyed my time at the academy, and it gave me a lot of opportunities. I wasn't aware of everything that goes into being an opera singer before I came to Poland. So it was definitely an eye-opener and a huge education for me.
You answered my question very well, but the underpinnings of my question are that
Right.
there have been academies where I have been a guest teacher, not on faculty, where the focus is music, 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 voice production, technique, theory, maybe learning enough of the language to sing in it, occasionally learning the language fluently, which is something that I stand by 100%.
Right.
I have also studied in places where that's been the policy when I was a student. But then at La Scala, I can tell you that at La Scala, it was very interdisciplinary. And you had to know every aspect about scenery, costumes, lighting, stage movement, dance, deportment, languages, the culture behind it. As you said, art history. We would go to the nearby art museum, the Brera, not just to learn Renaissance and post-Renaissance art, but to look at a painting and perhaps see what the Italians call an atteggiamento, a positioning that may inform the character that you're making, or in my case as a director, that I would try to impart to someone else, that I would even look at the emotion of a particular character in a painting and apply that to the creation of the character of the artist I was directing or coaching. But to me, there's no right and wrong, but I just know that there are many different experiences, and I was not familiar with how it would be done in Łódź in Poland.
So we did have classes with what we call charakteryzacja. So that was more like makeup. Characterization, makeup, typical for classical, for more like for something comic, something like that. And generally, I think I'm very thankful to my teacher, to my voice teacher, who actually encouraged me to participate in as many of these activities and to have an interdisciplinary approach to this. So I did. That's one of the reasons why I took up the art history course, and I took the opportunity of having a little bit of money and free time, flying to Paris to go to the Louvre and explore, travel to Vienna, explore as much as I could the Albertina Museum. Back then they had an exhibit of Impressionism. So that was, I think, generally my voice teacher did encourage me at least, to have this interdisciplinary approach to my art form.
The next question I'm going to ask you I don't want to get into politics. I don't want to put you in the position of speaking about politics, but just about the realities of our world, that you live in Poland right now, and
Right.
you happen not to be Polish. You're from a different part of the world that historically has had huge political changes and evolutions and so on that could take a whole lifetime to explore. But on one side is Russia, which historically Poland has had issues with, and
Right.
that's explored somewhat in the opera Boris Godunov when they do the full Polish Act Two. Um, Poland borders Ukraine, and there is a war going on, and there are, as we know, many refugees coming into Poland from Ukraine. Poland, sorry, borders Germany, where there is history. 83 years ago this month was the invasion of Poland at the beginning of World War II. Um, Therefore, Poland is very surrounded by its own history. In
Right.
addition, it has a very complex history and identity of its own. Um, Many Polish Jews were killed, not always by the Russians and the Germans and the Ukrainians, but also by the Poles. Um, Poland is an incredibly devout country for Catholicism, making it different in a way from some of the other surrounding countries. My question is not your opinion on any of that, but the degree to which you feel that presence as part of your daily life in Poland, and the degree to which Poles talk about it and refer to it, and you may in fact discover that they feel this way or that way on a particular topic.
Um, I find that generally the Polish people, the people I work with, um, these days they're generally focusing on how to make a good living and how to lead as normal a life as possible. Mainly because of the inflation and the recession that everybody's talking about and all of that. So there are real problems that the Polish people are facing every day that touches on their daily lives. Um, for example, there's been a huge demand for coal, and people are buying raw materials like coal because they fear for a very cold winter where we may or may not have sufficient heating to heat our homes. And so that's definitely going to be useful. So these are the problems that are being faced by the Polish people right now. Of course, back when the war started, it was a very big topic. Everybody was talking about it. But as time has passed, the Polish people have in some way, in my observation only, um, have learned to understand what the status quo is and refocus their energies and thoughts on how to survive the situation that they are facing in their own country. Of course, this situation is added to by the influx of the refugees, the war refugees. I'm not sure of the numbers, but I think it's about close to 5 million.
Yeah,
Um, so
that's
I think
extraordinary to absorb 5 million people into your
in, in,
country.
in a country that has about 37 million.
Yeah,
So that's a big chunk of the population
yeah.
that's been added to the country. So that's definitely draining on the resources. But in my experience of 12 years having been here, I know that the Polish people are very generous and very hospitable. And so whatever they say and however they may display their feelings, they tend to be very generous and hospitable. So this is the generosity and hospitality that's allowed me and encouraged me to survive as an Indian in Poland, because I
Mhm.
don't have many Indian friends back here in Poland.
Yeah,
Well, part of the reason, a big reason, is because I'm very busy, but But otherwise, yes, I've always had the kindness of my Polish friends and their families. So I think that the real problem that I hear my colleagues at work and my friends discussing are, for example, how they would manage to pay off their the loans that they've taken from the bank for their homes or for their car and so on. I hear people talking about if the people who work in the service sector, who work as lawyers or teachers, talk about they wonder if they should increase their fees, if they should raise up their fees, because they know that the next year is going to be tough on them, and then they discuss about how they could go about doing that, because the people that they serve also face uh, the brunt of the situation. So
Mhm.
those are the topics that really is on everybody's mind lately.
So people who follow me on social media, some of them know that for a number of years, I've been going every 2 months, 3 months, 4 months to an eye hospital. My eyes are fine, but they need monitoring. And I had surgery a year ago. And it's one of the oldest eye hospitals in the world. It's more than 200 years old. And right next to it is a restaurant called Little Poland. And sometimes when I have my treatment, um, I then go next door to Little Poland and have a good meal, because if there's a complication, I have to go right back to the doctor. And so I've come to know a lot of very delicious Polish food.
And what do you like?
And well, let me tell you, on the menu, it
Right.
says Polish cuisine is as good as the music of Chopin. And
Wow.
I love that they will take a composer, the most famous Polish composer, and put him on the front of a menu, not pictures of Poland, the picture of Chopin.
Right.
And the soups are delicious, the vegetables, the kasha, all of that is the baking is really delicious, the yeast breads. They make some of the best omelets that I've ever had in New York. It's a small place, it's not fancy looking, but the quality of the food is very, very high. And everyone who works there practically is Polish and they speak in Polish. And to me, it's sort of an immersion into Polish culture that I do every 2, 3, 4 months. I was there this week. And so I'm interested to know. I think Polish food is very fine when well prepared, and the soups are outstanding.
Right.
How you adapted from the magnificent cuisine of India, which I love, to a very different cuisine, and literally what effect it had on your body, because you were asked to tolerate different kinds of foods, and you as a singer use your body for your work.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that the first week or so in Poland was terrible because I had no idea of what to eat, and I was staying in a dormitory with which is foreign students. I didn't have any friends. My roommate was always out, so I had no way of asking anyone. Some of them didn't even speak English, so it was really I survived on bread and bananas for a week. That was terrible. But on and on. Eventually, I moved to a different dormitory where the person I was staying with he spoke English, and he pointed out a few shops to me where I could go do my shopping, and then I started cooking Indian food. But eventually, we would share our food. I would share my cooking with him, and he would do the same with me. And that's how I slowly started to enjoy Polish food. I have to say that it was a shocker for me the first time I spent Christmas in Poland, because during Christmas they served only fish, and I wasn't a fish eater. I didn't like fish. Um, but eventually I got to like it. I think the seventh Christmas that I spent in Poland, eventually I started eating fish by the seventh Christmas. I believe that fish is an acquired taste, and I ate it only once a year during Christmas, and so it took me 7 years to acquire the taste. But I can say that now I even prefer Polish cuisine to Indian cuisine
Wow.
before singing. I think if I'm not,
That's what I was going for,
yeah,
because we're talking about digestion, we're talking, let's be blunt, about burping, about the movement of
right,
air.
yeah,
Indian food, which I adore, I'm going to generalize and say it is spice based,
right,
whereas Polish food has spices, but it's a lot more herbal.
yes,
Things like
that's right,
dill and poppy seed, which is not an herb, but it's something
right.
else. Um,
They
there,
use a lot of marjorie, yeah,
yes,
rosemary, marjorie,
yeah.
yeah,
So the herbs rather
right,
than the
yeah,
spices.
yeah.
How does that feel in your digestive tract as a singer? I mean, not as an eater.
I haven't noticed anything a big change or a big influence of these herbs on my digestion. I do enjoy the aroma and the smell and the taste of it, the flavors, but I haven't really noticed any of that. I do enjoy having a light Polish meal before an hour before I have to sing. My teacher always told me to that it was sufficient if I wasn't hungry when I went in to sing. But I prefer to have a little bit of food in my tummy before I go to sing. And usually I enjoy a bit of Polish. It can be well, I prefer to go with non-starchy food, and so I stick with salads and meat,
Mm-hmm.
mainly chicken. Yeah, but I avoid Indian food, especially rice. I avoid rice before I
Mm-hmm.
sing. Yeah.
What about kasha, which is a Polish grain that's delicious?
In the beginning, I didn't really, I wasn't fond of kasha, but I have come to like
I
it.
love it. Yeah.
It depends on what it's served with, because when you have the brown groats, the brown kasha,
Yeah.
it's called in Polish we call it kasha gryczana,
Mm-hmm.
and that has more of a nutty flavor to it, a smoked nutty flavor to it.
Yeah, I love it.
I I, I really like that with their mushroom soup or the
Yes,
mushroom sauce on it. That's
exactly.
one of my favorites to eat with mushrooms. Yeah.
So I asked it because I've known more than a few Russian, Ukrainian, and Slavic singers who have a bowl of kasha before they perform. They
Oh,
feel
that's
that gives them
interesting.
energy. To me, it
Okay,
would get caught. I love kasha, but it would get caught in my teeth.
you're
And
right.
I mean, if I'm about to do a public presentation where I speak, last night I spoke to a Japanese group and I spoke for 3 hours about opera, and I ate nothing before
Right,
because I wanted a very clear passage. I didn't want my stomach gurgling. There was a microphone.
right.
Um, but Kasha, Kasha feels very secure to me. It feels very soothing and
I This is very interesting. I'm gonna give this a shot the next time. We just started this season at the Hooch Grand Theater. I'm gonna give this a shot before the next performance, and I'll write to you. I'll let you know what I thought.
we'll talk to your colleagues because I don't want to put you, if you're about to sing Figaro and you feel it's a long role and you feel not
Well,
not yourself, because
yeah,
I've written a lot, really a lot, and I've broadcast for the BBC about the relationship of food and singers, and every singer I've known has had his or her own traditions, and
right,
there's no right and wrong. Beverly Sills, the soprano, always had a steak at about 4 in the afternoon of a day of a
right,
performance. Many other singers I know wouldn't touch anything. Other
right,
singers I know eat during performances to keep up their strength. One
right,
very famous soprano sang La Traviata, and in the last act, before saying Anina, calling for her maid, she would eat ginger cookies in the bed, biscuits, in the bed while the prelude was playing, or the not prelude, the music of the last act was playing, and she'd be eating, and I would say to her, um, don't the biscuits dry in your mouth? And she's kept a
Right.
little water there. So she would be busy eating and drinking while the music was on, and she knew when the light would come up, and then everything would be out of the bed. And I remember one time I went to the stage after the performance and was helping with the removal of the set. There were crumbs all over the bed. And, there's a tenor, Richard Leach, who
Right.
would chomp on ice during the performance, and Birgit Nils, who would drink a beer. Every one of them had their own traditions. So
Right.
to me, there's no right and wrong, but I've known very famous Russian soprano always would have a big bowl of kasha about an hour before the show went on.
I've my voice teacher told me this once, that he worked with a soprano who kept with her a thermos full of chicken bouillon.
Yeah.
And while she would wait off stage, she would sip constantly. Of course, the whole thermos would last her the whole performance,
Yeah.
but she would sip constantly from time to time, and that sort of helped her to keep to have a better feeling for her
Yeah.
throat and her mucosa. So,
Right. And
but
I've known more than a few opera singers, especially those who are vegetarians, who eat slices of apple, not the rind, not the peel, but
right.
just slices of apple, sliced very thin, that they'd put in their mouth, that would soften, would give a
Yeah.
little bit of liquid.
Yeah.
And, and Franco Corelli supposedly ate garlic, which upset the women he sang with. But no, it's a fascinating story. And to me, there is no right and wrong. As I said,
Right.
at least half the singers I know eat nothing before going on, and
Right.
they'll eat after.
It's a very personal thing. I try not to think too much about these things. I try to stay. Well, it's one way to deal with the nervousness and stage
Mm-hmm.
fright, is to do everything as I would on any other day, and remind myself that I'm prepared for the performance. And so there's nothing that could possibly destroy my performance. But if anything, um, it could be too cold on stage. There
Yeah.
could be so many things that could bother me. So I'm not going to bother about, things like heating. And I go with what I think would feel comfortable. And I don't really have a certain rule, except for avoiding certain kinds of food. But if
Mm-hmm.
I have to eat, I do eat.
So
I do find that going on empty stomach and being hungry is much worse than having something in my tummy.
mhm. So having completed conservatory in Buj, you are now a working singer, a working baritone. Um, Mostly, I understand, in Poland. Have you sung outside of Poland?
I did. I did participate in some competitions and festivals around in France, in Germany, and in Croatia. So I did sing. I did have the opportunity to sing in various opera houses, and in festivals. And then I did participate in down south in Poland. There is a choir at the Jasna Góra cathedral, where they 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 do a lot of sacral music, a lot of oratorium, and so the soprano and the mezzo soprano, the girls who I studied with, invited me as soon as I finished my training, well, finished my academy study, invited me on to sing with them. So I toured with them in Germany as well, singing. Mainly we sang the Weihnachtsoratorium,
Mm-hmm.
but apart from that,
Christmas oratorio, yeah.
yeah, we
Mhm.
Bach, yeah. Apart from that, we did a few other works, yeah. So I have sung a bit. here and there. And last year, I think I participated in Weimar. I think it was in June. I participated at the Lyric Opera Studio in Weimar, singing Figaro in the Marriage Figaro. Mozart. Yeah.
So you, as I asked many of my guests, gave me a list of selections from the Adagio catalog, and I love them because they're not, apart from one, what most people give. The one that you gave that is familiar and wonderful is the role of Figaro in Le Nozze di Figaro, with
Right.
a Thomas Allen recording and Riccardo Muti conducting Kathleen Battle Susanna. I think that speaks for itself.
Right.
Because it's just wonderful, and because you were covering the role of Figaro at the Grand Theater in Buch. The others are terrific. The music I really love. Anytime people recommend Shostakovich, I'm happy, because I think he's a marvelous composer, and he composed a much broader range of things than the wonderful Leningrad Symphony, his two operas. But you picked Spanish songs, Opus 100, sung by a baritone I don't know, Mikhail Lukonin.
Yes.
Tell me about the baritone and why these songs by Shostakovich.
This is a song cycle that was sung by a colleague of mine back when we were training at the academy, and it was picked by him and our voice teacher at that time. My voice teacher sung a lot of Russian repertoire in his active years, and he recorded a lot of these works. And not only, he was also Verdi singer and so on. He was a bass. So he introduced me to Russian music, and I have to say that I fell in love with these songs when I heard my friends singing them. They're beautiful songs. The music is fantastic. The words, the poetry to which it is composed is wonderful. And quite simply, I like this baritone because I think it's wonderful how Mikhail Lukonin can put in that meaning and that sense into what he's singing about. I must confess, there has been a time when I've kept the score in front of me and listened to these songs, and with wet eyes. They're so beautiful that they made me cry. So that is one of the reasons why I picked this song cycle to send to you, and that this is something that I'm working on right now, and I hope that in the near future I can work on this with a pianist and perhaps present it somewhere.
I wonder if you know the songs, the very late in his life songs by Shostakovich, based on poetry by Michelangelo.
Oh, this I don't know about.
Oh, they're magnificent, because what he did, this was in the 1960s, I believe, when he had heart disease, he was near death, and he took poetry by Michelangelo that dealt with all the issues of the creative life.
Right.
Frustration, creativity, moments of inspiration, isolation, lack of love, fear of death, all those things. And he never referred to his own life, Shostakovich, I mean, but they are songs that tell the story of his late life. And
Right.
they're often sung by bass, but Dmitry Vorostovsky sang the beautiful, and he was a glorious baritone. And I've heard baritones sing them. I've heard mezzo-sopranos sing them. But initially, I believe they were intended for bass. But look at them. Listen, you now listen to Adagio, so listen to them there. Then another wonderful thing that you selected by Ronaldo Hahn, a Venezuelan composer who was based in Paris, Venezia. Songs in the Venetian dialect, sung by Joyce DiDonato, and the pianist is Julian Drake. And why this? I mean, I was a Venetian history major, so you don't have to persuade me. But why did you pick These.
Well, um, well, this is how I discovered these songs is um, I happened to come across a couple of his other songs, Aflori
Hmm.
and uh, uh, L'Enamouré, I think that's how you say.
Hmm.
And I was learning those songs to work on my French and to work on the songs. I found those songs to be fantastically beautiful. And then I looked for more songs by Reynaldo Hahn. I stumbled across this recording, I think, of Joyce DiDonato singing in the Carnegie Hall. These
I
songs.
was there. I
You were
attended that.
there.
Yeah, I
You
attended
know
that
exactly
recording.
what I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
Yes, yes.
I love the way she carries that evening and she carries herself. It's just fantastic. And she's
Venetian dialect
effortless.
is very particular because for people who don't know Italian, it is Italian, but with a very different pronunciation and many words that are just a different grammar.
Right.
Io vado, I'm going in Italian, mi go, or mi go in Venetian, I'm
Oh,
going. Um, the word ciao, as in ciao, hello or
right,
goodbye, is Venetian. There are many, 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 many words that come out of Venetian. It's very sing-song. There's a slight lisp
mm,
in the dialect sometimes if you're speaking it very traditionally. And you can hear it in the Venetian music. You hear it in gondoliers when they're speaking in
right,
Venetian because their voices go up. So what Rinaldo Hahn did and Rossini earlier did songs of the gondoliers and La Bella Gondoliera, the female gondolier. Um, Rossini imitated the sound of Venetian speech in his
right,
music brilliantly, as did Rinaldo Hahn. I
right.
want to commend to you and to listeners that in addition to Joyce DiDonato, who splendidly does Rinaldo Hahn, Susan Graham is
Right.
magnificent in the
Yeah,
singing of Rinaldo Hahn and really worth checking out on
yeah,
Adagio or elsewhere. And then you gave me composers I don't know. They're Polish. And I
right.
love that you have embraced Polish operatic repertory and you sing in Polish
Yes,
and you perform in Polish. And Stanislav Moniuszko, who lived from 1819 to 1872, he wrote more than 24 operas. You mentioned The Haunted Manor and Halka, especially the choral sections.
right.
Tell us about those.
Where would we start? Well, these are the Haunted Mansion in Polish called the Haunted Manor in Polish called Straszny Dwór, and Halka are two of the most frequently performed Polish operas in Poland. And they're in a way the national operas of Poland. I particularly like the choral sections because I've had the opportunity to be on stage and to see what it sounds like, what it feels like. And to me, it's simply amazing. It's wonderful to be able to experience the charm and the uh, the idyllic traditional folk atmosphere of the Polish people. In these cases, they're talking about the Highlanders, the Gorals. We're talking about even the nobility, the Polish nobility of those times. What I really, really find fascinating is just the atmosphere of the whole scene. I thought that was because I've been here for 12 years, and so I've grown accustomed to it. And so it's only natural that I would enjoy it. But recently, just a couple of days ago, a Mexican tenor joined the
Hmm.
chorus of the Łódź Grand Theater, and he came in for one rehearsal, and it was his first rehearsal where he heard us practicing, rehearsing the choral parts to these operas. And he felt the same as I did. So that kind of confirmed to me that it's not just because I've been here for 12 years. Anyone could just as easily fall in love with these tunes and this atmosphere that this music has to offer. Yeah.
And then, not on Adagio, but you want me to discover it, and I will. An opera called The Charlatan from 1814 by Karol Krupinski, who lived from 1785 to 1857. He was a mentor of Chopin, and he conducted at the Warsaw Opera from 1810 to 1840. I learned that he composed mostly in the Romantic style. And you, very recently, on September 10th, sang the role of Fantousias in this opera, The Charlatan. So we're talking very recently because that was last week.
Right.
Talk about this opera, The Charlatan, and make a case for it to be performed outside of Poland.
Well, one of the things that struck me about this opera was it's very easy to hear the influence of Mozart on Karol Korpinski's music, on his composing style here. I think that this is an opera that could very well, very easily be performed in any other language, because the story that it proposes, the ideas, the characters that it proposes are very much universal. And I think that the ideas that the topics that it deals with, the problems of each role of each character are very commonplace. The music is a lot of fun. It does not require a full-blown orchestra. I think we did it with a 30-strong orchestra. So that makes it very accessible to smaller companies as well.
Mm-hmm.
What I really enjoyed about the music and performing here was obviously everybody else that I had to work with, but also the libretto. The libretto was very funny. We found ourselves joking between ourselves all the time, and there was a lot of material that we could dig into, and each rehearsal provided us with an opportunity to do something new and something different with the libretto. The result of which was an audience that enjoyed the performance, despite the fact that it was raining, because it was outside. So we decided to go on with the show with rain, and the audience decided to stay and stay for the whole performance right through. I think that the performance was recorded on video, and it should be available sometime soon. So I'll be sure to send you a link.
And I will post it.
Right.
I'm just remembering as we're speaking that a number of years ago, and my guess would be 1999, I was working at the Paris Opera and staying at the Garnier, so I was staying in the right bank. And I was walking nearby the Church of the Madeleine on the Place de la Madeleine, and I saw a sign that said in French, Chopin's funeral, 150 years later. When he died, they did his funeral in Paris at the Church of the Madeleine, and they performed in the funeral 150 years before music that he specified should be played. And some of it was his own, the funeral march, but also music from Polish composers, a couple of French composers. And they were recreating the funeral 150 years later with the same music. They did not have a coffin, obviously. And what I learned that day was that while Chopin's body was buried in France, he insisted that his heart be taken home to Poland because he
Right.
said, "My heart belongs in Poland." I had a guest on this program a couple of years ago named Annick Lafarge, who wrote a book called Chasing Chopin. And in
Right.
that book, it's a wonderful book, she deals with the story of how his heart got back to Poland. And the point of why I'm raising this is, apart from the fascination of that day, is that it strikes me that Poland, like Finland, like the Czech Republic, are countries with incredible artistic and musical traditions. They are not necessarily the superpowers the way we think of Germany, Austria, Italy, France, England, um, in certain regards, but their power is much bigger than their size. Now, the Czech Republic and Finland have small populations, Poland is bigger, but the fact that the little Poland restaurant next to my eye hospital talks about Chopin on the cover of their menu. And I meet Poles who talk about Jan Paderewski, the great musician patriot. And whenever I meet Poles, I have worked a little with Piotr Beczava, the tenor. They talk about their musicians as national heroes. He was not saying he was, but what I mean is they're composers, they're historic musicians. Teresa Kubiak was a soprano at the Met for many years. I knew Teresa Ziliskara. All of them recall Polish musicians for their identity, much
Right.
more than the food, much more than the battles, much more than the tragedies. They recall the music as their identity. And it must be very interesting for you, especially as a man from India, where the music is so diverse and covers thousands of years and instruments and traditions, and would take many lifetimes to learn, to be in a place where music is front and center for the whole country,
Right.
as opposed to Karnataka, is that your state in Bangalore? The number of states that there are in India, all with their own incredible traditions. Goa in the south is
Right.
in Kerala is a very different kind of musical tradition than for the north, for the west, all over India. Do you feel this sense of pride, and more than pride, identification of themselves as Poles in their music?
I think that, well, to some extent it is pride, but yeah, well, is your question, do I feel the pride?
No,
No,
do
or
you notice it in the Poles?
what I do notice in the Poles is that the Poles are very thankful for those, for the work of those who are doing a great job. I think my colleagues and my friends are very happy and grateful for the efforts and the achievements of people like Piotr Beczała, like the people you mentioned, and they do see that um, these individuals always come back to give back
Yeah.
to them, and I think it's to a large extent this gratitude
Mm-hmm.
that I observe amongst my colleagues. Of course, there's a great deal of admiration, and they look up to them as role models. But I have to say that it's a great deal of gratitude.
Speaking of gratitude, let me express my gratitude to you, my friend. It's nice to finally talk to you after years of writing to one another and exploring this not in a printed way, but in a conversational way. Um, Continued good luck and good work and
Thank you.
enjoyment and pleasure and growth. And when I'm able to get back to Europe, I look forward to hearing you perform. Nikhil
Great.
Goyal, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Fred. I hope we get a chance again to talk. I'm definitely going to send you the links that we discussed, and hope to see you soon.
And I will post them in my social media. Be
Great.
well.